Imagine the icy silence of the endless Siberian taiga, where for hundreds of kilometers around there is nothing but frosted larches and a piercing wind that penetrates even the thickest greatcoat. It is here, in the very heart of the wilderness, where time itself seems frozen in permafrost, that one of the most sinister and inexplicable sounds of our time is born. In the headphones of a radio amateur, tuned to a frequency we conditionally call Radio 1100, amidst white noise and static discharges, a mechanical, emotionless voice suddenly emerges. It dictates numbers: 1100, 32, 58, 74. This is not just interference or accidental induction from Siberian power plants. This is the pulse of a system that was created to outlive humanity itself. If you think that in the era of satellite internet and quantum encryption, old shortwave transmitters are a thing of the past, you are deeply mistaken. Right now, as you listen to these lines, invisible waves pierce through space, transmitting encrypted coordinates whose meaning is clear only to a select few. We begin our investigation into a phenomenon that makes the hearts of professional radio operators beat faster, and conspiracy theorists frantically search for bunkers on a map. Before we delve into the abyss of abandoned mines and closed military towns, I ask you to become part of our research community. Subscribe to the channel, like this material, and share it with those who are not afraid to face the unknown. Your support helps us bring the darkest secrets of history to light. In the air of a typical amateur radio station, cluttered with dusty oscilloscopes and transceivers, there is always the smell of ozone and overheated rosin. This is the specific smell of anticipation. People sit on the frequency for months, recording a monotonous hum that radio operators call a buzzer. But Radio 1100 is something different. It doesn't just hum, it transmits coordinates. Few notice that the rhythm of these transmissions strangely correlates with seismic activity in certain regions, or with the movement of mobile missile launchers. Historians often argue about the reasons for the longevity of such stations, attributing everything to the bureaucratic inertia of the system. But I propose to look at the logistics and physics of the process. Shortwaves have a unique property. They reflect off the ionosphere, circling the globe. To suppress such a signal, you literally have to jam the entire airwave, which is technically impossible. This is an ideal tool for conditions where everything else has turned to dust. We see here not a technical anachronism, but the highest form of reliability, taken to the point of absurdity. When we analyze the phenomenon of number stations, we inevitably encounter the psychological phenomenon of waiting for the end. Each such station is a monument to the era of the Great Confrontation, when two superpowers had their finger on the trigger, awaiting the command for the final termination of earthly civilization. Here lies the first serious crack in the official version, which states that these are just training grounds for radio operators. If these are exercises, then why have they lasted for decades without a single failure? Why do announcers whose voices were recorded on tape back in the 1970s continue to read out rows of numbers addressed to people who may have long since passed away? This resembles the behavior of the archetypal faithful guardian who guards the empty gates of an abandoned city. In psychology, this is called ritualistic fixation. When the meaning of an action is lost, the action itself becomes sacred. Siberian forests conceal more than just bears and gold prospectors. Along the coastlines of great rivers are scattered the so-called Object C sites, which are not mentioned in guidebooks. It is from there, according to triangulation data, that the signal radio 1100 emanates. The technical condition of these objects is a separate topic for investigation. Eyewitnesses who have managed to approach the perimeters of such zones describe a strange combination of dilapidation and ideal order. Rusty gates with 5-pointed stars can stand next to the latest surveillance cameras and super-powerful antenna fields, which are suspiciously clear of snow even in the fiercest frost. This suggests that life is maintained inside, hidden from prying eyes. Here we see a clear contradiction. If the object is abandoned, where does the energy for hundreds of kilowatts of transmitters come from? And if it is inhabited, then where are the traces of activity of the hundreds of people needed to service such a behemoth? Let's momentarily step away from the dry figures and imagine the operator of such a station. This is a person whose life is subject to a strict schedule that doesn't change for years. At his disposal are an iron bed, a lamp under a green shade, and the endless dial of a clock. His psychological portrait is the embodiment of stoicism bordering on madness. He knows that his message is, most likely, a sentence. His ambitions are erased by regulations. His personality dissolved in his call sign. How does such self-sacrifice affect the strategic stability of the entire system? On the one hand, it makes it invulnerable to the human factor. On the other, it creates the preconditions for a fatal error if the operator at some point decides that silence on the air is precisely that long-awaited signal for action. Few know that there were moments in history when precisely the psychological stability of communication specialists prevented the accidental launch of irreversible processes. There is a version that official sources try to avoid. It concerns a system codenamed Perimeter, known in the West as Dead Hand. This is a fully automated complex for managing a massive retaliatory strike. Its essence is simple and terrifying. If command posts are destroyed and the country's leadership cannot be reached, the system itself decides to launch. But how does a machine understand that the end has come? It listens to the airwaves. It searches for confirmation of life or its absence. And this is where radio 1100 can play the role of that very control pulse. As long as the numbers are transmitted, the world exists. As soon as absolute silence reigns on the air, mechanisms in deep shafts will begin to move. This is the archetype of the sleeping giant, whose breath we hear in radio interference. And this is not a metaphor, but a harsh engineering logic dictated by the fear of a sudden disarming attack. At this point in our investigation, I want to ask you, dear viewers, what would you do in the place of a person who heard not the usual set of numbers on the air, but a direct instruction to act, understanding that this decision would change the world forever? Write in the comments whether you believe that a machine can be more reliable than a human in such matters. Your answers will help us better understand the psychology of modern society in the face of global threats. Returning to the facts, it is worth mentioning a strange incident that occurred in the 90s of the 20th century, when Army funding was minimal. Many number stations then fell silent, but Radio 1100 continued broadcasting. Moreover, it was during that period that the intensity of transmissions increased. Where did the funds come from? There is a theory about sleeper agents. According to it, these stations transmit instructions to intelligence networks that have lived ordinary lives for decades deep behind enemy lines. Every home has a shortwave receiver which cannot be traced, unlike internet traffic. You simply listen to music, while in the next room your neighbor, a respectable postman from suburban Ohio, writes numbers in a notebook with soluble paper. Here we encounter a profound paradox. The world's most sophisticated intelligence relies on century-old technologies because they are the only ones that cannot be remotely hacked. It is interesting to analyze the content of the transmissions themselves. Amateur cryptographers have been trying to crack the codes of Radio 1100 for years using powerful computers. The result is always 0. This suggests the use of so-called one-time pads, an encryption method that is theoretically impossible to break if the key is used only once and delivered personally. This turns each transmission into a unique historical document that cannot be read without context. Few notice that the structure of these messages changes depending on the political situation. In moments of heightened international tensions, the announcer's voice becomes clearer, and the intervals between groups of numbers shorten. This is similar to the accelerated heartbeat of an organism sensing danger. Let's turn our attention to microhistory. One declassified report mentions a case where a group of geologists accidentally wandered into a similar station in Siberia. They described the atmosphere inside as a frozen cast of 1978. On the walls were civil defense posters. On the tables were faceted glasses in cup holders, and from the speakers flowed the same monotonous voice. But what struck them most was the absolute absence of dust. Everything worked, everything was spinning, although they did not encounter any people in the premises. Whether they were there and simply hid, or whether the station had long since switched to a fully autonomous mode, controlled by the artificial intelligence of those times, is an open question. This creates the effect of something inhuman, a mechanical god, continuing to execute its program even after all the gods of Olympus have long been forgotten. Here arises a moment of serious doubt about the official version of training purposes. If these are training exercises, then why has not a single pronunciation error been made in 40 years? The human voice in the recording sounds suspiciously even. Modern sound analysis methods show that this could be an early form of speech synthesis or a very high-quality splicing of individual phonemes. In the 70s of the 20th century, such technology was on the verge of science fiction. Who created this voice? Whose prototype did it serve? Perhaps it was some humble employee of the communications department, whose name was lost in the archives of the Ministry of Defense, but whose voice now eternally sounds over the Taiga, foretelling a storm. Psychologically, this creates an incredible effect. We hear a ghost of the past that dictates the terms for our future. The second point of doubt is related to geography. Stations often change their physical location, although the antenna fields remain in place. This is a technical trick called remote control of transmitters via relay lines. The real source of the signal can be thousands of kilometers away from the antenna, in a deep bunker under the Urals. This makes the system practically invulnerable to a pinpoint strike. We see here the implementation of a distributed brain strategy, where each antenna is merely a nerve ending, and the decision-making center itself is reliably hidden deep within granite. Historians debate whether such complexity was justified. But if we look at the logic of total war, we understand. This is the only way to guarantee a retaliatory strike. The third point of doubt concerns the digital age. Many experts argue that number stations are garbage that will soon disappear. However, over the past 5 years, the number of such signals in the air has not decreased, but increased. New frequencies have been added to Radio 1100, using modern modulation methods that masquerade as ordinary digital noise or satellite navigation signals. This means that the system is evolving. It is not dying, it is mimicking. This reveals the ideological conflict of our time. We are used to trusting transparent and fast technologies, but real power still prefers secrecy and archaic methods. This is a clash of two value systems: the democracy of open data and the totalitarianism of secret protocols. The transformation of our perception of this phenomenon occurs at the moment we realize Radio 1100 is not about war. It's about fear. It is the physical embodiment of paranoia elevated to the rank of state policy. When you hear these numbers, you hear the echo of human uncertainty about the future. The perimeter system, which we mentioned, was created not to destroy, but to deter. But deterrence only works when everyone knows about the existence of the threat. And therein lies the main paradox. Secret stations must be heard by everyone so that they never have to be used for their direct purpose. It is a cry into the void that must be heard on the other side of the planet. The culmination of our investigation leads us to a frightening conclusion. In modern conditions, when cyber wars can disable power grids and banking systems of entire countries in seconds, analog stations like Radio 1100 become the last bastion of sovereignty. They are those very black boxes that will preserve information when the internet goes dark. We see the end of a long dispute between digital and analog. In a critical situation, the one who knows how to use a 32 wrench and a soldering iron wins, not the one who writes code. This is a return to the origins, to the brute force of an electromagnetic wave. The lessons we can learn from this story are universal. The first and most important is that humanity is never fully prepared for peace. We always leave a back door in the form of systems of destruction. The second lesson is that technologies do not disappear. They simply find new applications. What was yesterday a means of communication for spies, today becomes an element of a global security system that we prefer not to think about. And the third lesson is that mystery is always more attractive than truth. As long as Radio 1100 continues to broadcast, it will stir minds, making us ask questions about who we are and where we are going. Ultimately, the enigma of the Siberian transmitters is a mirror of our own anxieties. We search for meaning in these numbers because we are afraid to admit the world can be much simpler and at the same time more terrifying than it seems to us. Perhaps, on the other end of the line, there is no conspiracy. Only automatons executing a program written by people who have long since vanished into oblivion. But it is precisely this thought of a working machine without a master that frightens us most. This is the true perimeter of our psyche, the boundary beyond which human understanding ends and the cold logic of survival begins. Concluding this narrative, I want to return to that very radio amateur in the frost-covered room. He takes off his headphones, rubs his eyes, and looks out the window at the dawn. The signal of Radio 1100 fades, dissolving into the morning air, only to awaken again tomorrow and remind us that somewhere out there, deep in the forests, someone or something is still waiting for its hour. And as long as this voice sounds, we can be sure of one thing. The story is not over yet. It is simply encrypted in 4-digit groups of numbers, flying over the world in search of its addressee. Gazing into the past of these stations, we find the archetype of the perpetual motion machine, but in its darkest manifestation. It is a mechanism created to maintain order through the threat of chaos. Recall how in ancient myths, gods left signs for people that could not be ignored. Radio 1100 is a modern analog of an oracle whose language is forgotten, but whose presence is felt on the skin. It is the embodiment of the collective unconscious of the atomic age, when every sound on the air could mean the beginning of the end or the continuation of life. We see how strategic calculation turns into mythology and military doctrine into an object of worship for thousands of people around the world. Few people consider the role that everyday details play in this system. The quality of Soviet copper in cables laid in the 1960s is still considered exemplary. Contacts, covered with a layer of technical silver, do not oxidize for decades in the high humidity of underground structures. This is material evidence of the meticulousness with which our ancestors prepared for the worst-case scenario. When we talk about Radio 1100, we are talking about the triumph of engineering thought placed at the service of fear. This evokes both horror and admiration. How could something so durable and yet so useless in peacetime be created? The intrigue surrounding these stations is further fueled by the fact that sometimes fragments of classical music or strange sound loops are heard on the air. Historians suggest that this is a way to check signal quality, but psychologists see something else in it. It is the human face of the system, an attempt to add a drop of life to the lifeless digital stream. Imagine, amidst the roar of interference, a tender melody by Tchaikovsky suddenly breaks through for a few seconds, and then it is again interrupted by a voice dictating coordinates. This creates an incredible contrast, emphasizing the tragedy of the situation. It is a battle between culture and mechanistic destruction, captured in the radio waves. Let's return to the question of archetypes. Within each of us lives an explorer, striving to solve the riddle of the Sphinx. Radio 1100 is the Sphinx of our time. It asks us the question, are you ready to hear the truth if you don't like it? And we continue to listen, hoping to find in these numbers confirmation that the world is still under control. But the truth may be that control has long been lost, and we are merely observing the inertia of a huge flywheel that cannot be stopped. This feeling of helplessness in the face of a system is one of the most powerful psychological triggers of modernity. We often look for logic where cold calculation reigns. The sleeper agents theory seems romantic, but reality is likely far more prosaic. These stations are elements of the global data transmission network, Zeus, operating on very low frequencies and capable of penetrating even ocean depths to reach nuclear submarines. The Siberian transmitters are merely intermediate links in this chain. Here, we see how logistics dictate form. For the signal to reach its recipient anywhere on the planet, repeaters are needed in the most inaccessible places. And the Taiga is perfectly suited for this. This is not a place for people, it's a place for machines. If we look at this through the prism of modernity, we'll see that numbers stations are the predecessors of blockchain. A distributed network, the absence of a central authority, the impossibility of data falsification. Soviet engineers devised a decentralized security system back when computers occupied entire floors of buildings. This once again proves that brilliant ideas don't depend on the level of technological development. They depend on the scale of the tasks. The task of survival in a global conflict spawned the most advanced tools, which we still use today without even realizing it. Concluding our investigation, it's worth mentioning what's happening with these stations right now. With the advent of satellite internet, many predicted their obsolescence. But it turned out that satellites are easy to blind with a laser or shoot down with a missile, while a shortwave station in the Siberian Taiga is practically impossible to destroy without the use of nuclear weapons. This makes Radio 1100 more relevant than ever. We have entered an era where old becomes new, and reliability is valued above speed. This is a great return to reality, where the sound from a speaker means more than a smartphone notification. Remember, every time you hear static on the radio, it might not just be interference. It could be a message addressed to all humanity. We are just accidental witnesses to a great conversation of machines that began long before our birth and will likely continue after us. And there is a peculiar comfort in this. The world is vast, complex, and full of mysteries that protect us with their incomprehensibility. Radio 1100 continues its eternal vigil, and as long as the numbers sound on the air, we have a little more time to think about what is truly important in this life. Siberia remains a place of power and mystery. Its expanses absorb sounds and people, leaving only legends and radio waves. Perhaps someday we will find those very bunkers, open the heavy doors, and see everything with our own eyes. But until then, we can only listen. Listen and try to understand the rhythm of this invisible heart that beats in the very center of a great land. This investigation is just the first step in studying the hidden mechanisms of our civilization. Many more discoveries await us, because history is never unambiguous, especially when it is written in numbers on the frequency 1100. Stay tuned. Ahead are analyses of even more mysterious phenomena that make us doubt the official picture of the world. The world is full of numbers stations. You just need to know how to tune into the right wave. And remember, silence on the air is sometimes far more dangerous than the loudest signal. See you in the next episodes, where we will continue our audit of reality and search for truth in the noise of interference.